Pregnant cleaner gets kicked in the stomach by millionaire's son, unaware her dad is the leader of a motorcycle gang. Rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The sound of the bucket hitting the floor echoed through the mansion hallway like an omen. The 6-month pregnant housekeeper tried to steady herself as the 4-year-old boy ran past her, but the shove was stronger than she expected. Her heavy body toppled to the side, and the corner of the marble table met her swollen belly with an impact that cut off her breath. Pain radiated throughout her abdomen as she tried to protect the baby with trembling hands. The cold mansion floor seemed to suck all the warmth from her body, and tears came before she could even fully process what had happened. The boy stared at her with furious eyes, his face red with anger. "You're just a dirty maid who shouldn't be here," he shouted, kicking the bucket she had dropped. "My dad doesn't like people like you." She tried to get up, but her legs were shaking so badly she could barely stand. Her belly ached in a way she had never felt before, and a terrible fear gripped her heart. 6 months pregnant, 6 months protecting the baby growing inside her, working double shifts to save enough money for when he was born. The sound of the front door opening echoed through the house, followed by firm footsteps on the marble. The 30-year-old businessman appeared in the hallway, still wearing his dark suit from the office, the phone glued to his ear as he finished a business call. When his eyes met the scene, his voice died in his throat. The woman on the floor, protecting her belly, tears streaming down her face, his son standing beside her with a defiant expression, the cleaning supplies scattered across the marble floor. The reality of the situation hit the man like a punch to the gut. "What happened here?" His voice was deeper than usual, laced with an authority that made the boy take a step back. "She was in my way," the son replied, raising his chin in an attempt to look brave. "I told her to move, but she didn't listen." The businessman looked at the housekeeper, struggling to get up, her hands still protecting her abdomen, and something inside him awoke. A fury he had never felt before, not even in the tensest business meetings, surged through his chest. But it wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, more primal. "Go to your room, now." The order came sharp, with no room for questioning. The boy opened his mouth to protest, but something in his father's gaze made him retreat. He ran down the hallways, leaving only the echo of his footsteps. The man knelt beside the woman, and for the first time in years, his hands didn't quite know what to do. He was used to controlling situations, to making quick decisions that moved millions in investments, but faced with that fragility, he felt completely lost. "Can you stand?" he asked, his voice softer now. She nodded, but when she tried to get up, a groan of pain escaped her lips. He didn't hesitate. He slipped one arm under her legs and another behind her back, lifting her into his arms with a tenderness that surprised them both. "We're going to the hospital," he murmured, walking towards the garage. "It's not necessary, sir. I'm fine." Her voice was weak, but he had already made his decision. During the ride in the luxury car, he drove with a controlled urgency, one hand on the wheel and the other holding hers. Words of reassurance flowed from his mouth without him knowing where they came from, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Everything will be all right. The baby will be all right." In the waiting room of the private hospital, the businessman discovered things about the woman who had worked in his house for 2 years, always discreet, always trying to go unnoticed. She was completely alone in the world. The baby's father had disappeared the moment he found out about the pregnancy, leaving her with only an address for a rundown boarding house on the other side of town and an iron determination to raise the child. When the doctors confirmed that both she and the baby were fine, just with a minor scare, the relief that washed over him was so intense that it frightened him. Why did he care so much? Why did this simple woman, whom he barely knew, awaken in him such visceral protectiveness? They returned to the mansion in silence, but it was a different silence, laden with something that neither of them could name. In the kitchen, he prepared a hot tea, his hands skilled with numbers and contracts, now clumsy with cups and sugar. "Why did you do this?" she asked finally. "Why did you help me?" He stopped, the cup halfway to her, and realized he didn't have an answer. Or maybe he did, but it wasn't an answer he was ready to admit. The following days brought a subtle but noticeable change to the routine of the mansion. The businessman began to appear at home during unusual hours, always with a plausible excuse. An important call he needed to make in his home office, documents he had forgotten, meetings that ended earlier than expected. The housekeeper noticed, but didn't comment. She continued with her silent work, but now there was a different awareness in the air. He watched her carefully cleaning the furniture with extra care because of her belly, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a warm caress on her skin. On Thursday, when she was organizing the library, he appeared with 2 glasses of juice. "For the baby," he said, extending one of the glasses. "Vitamin C is important." She smiled, the first time he had seen her truly smile, and the smile completely transformed her face. Beneath that simple and tired appearance, there was a natural beauty that he had never noticed before. Or maybe he hadn't allowed himself to notice. "How do you know that?" she asked, accepting the juice. "I read it somewhere." He didn't mention that he had spent the whole night researching pregnancy on the internet, something he had never done, even when his ex-wife was pregnant with their son. The conversation flowed naturally. She told him about the dreams she had for the baby, of giving him a better life than she had had. He talked about the constant pressure of business, about how sometimes he felt like he was building an empire without knowing exactly what for. "It must be hard carrying so much weight on your shoulders," she said, and there was a genuine understanding in her voice that he rarely encountered. "Sometimes I think the greatest weight is loneliness," he admitted, surprising himself with the honesty. She looked at him with eyes that seemed to see beyond the surface, beyond the expensive suit and the authority he wore like armor. "Loneliness is heavy even when you have money to carry it." In the weeks that followed, these conversations became frequent. He discovered that behind that silent woman there was a sharp intelligence, a perception about life that contrasted with the artificial world in which he lived. She voraciously read books borrowed from the public library, dreamed of one day going to college, had formed opinions on topics that he never imagined she knew about. She, in turn, saw beyond the cold mask he wore in the business world. She discovered the scars of an affectionless childhood, where displays of affection were seen as weakness. She learned about the marriage that had ended, not for lack of love, but for excessive ambition on both sides, leaving him skeptical that there could be something genuine between 2 people. The attraction grew silently, manifested in small but significant details. Hands that touched by chance when he passed documents for her to file. Glances that lingered longer than necessary. The physical proximity that gradually increased, as if they were magnets attracting each other. But along with the attraction came guilt. She felt inadequate for desiring a man she could never have, a man who lived in a world completely different from hers. He struggled against feelings he considered inappropriate for his position, questioning whether he was taking advantage of a situation of vulnerability. It was during this tense period that the rebellious son intensified his provocations. The boy had noticed the change in his father's behavior and directed all his frustration towards the housekeeper. He hid her cleaning supplies, deliberately spilled things soon after she had finished cleaning, threw strategic tantrums whenever she was around. "She's making you soft, Dad," he said during dinner, chewing with disdain. "Mom always said that maids have to know their place." The businessman felt his jaw clench. "Your mother doesn't live here anymore." "But she's coming back. She said she'll come back when you stop being silly." The revelation hit him like a lightning bolt. The ex-wife was manipulating the boy, using him as an informant and saboteur. The businessman realized that he needed to deal with this situation before it got completely out of control. On the following Monday, as if fate were orchestrating a cruel play, the ex-wife appeared unexpectedly at the mansion, an elegant woman of high society, impeccably dressed, with the calculated smile of someone who knew exactly what she wanted. "Honey, we need to talk," she said, completely ignoring the presence of the housekeeper who was mopping the marble staircase. The housekeeper felt the atmosphere change instantly. The air became heavy, charged with a tension that she knew well. It was the tension of someone who didn't belong, of someone who was being judged and considered insufficient. "What do you want?" The businessman's voice was cold, professional. "I want our family back. I want my son to grow up in a structured home, not being influenced by—" She paused deliberately, looking directly at the housekeeper. "By people who don't understand our social standing." The venomous comment hit home. The housekeeper felt her face flush, but she continued mopping, pretending not to hear. Each word, however, was etched into her chest like a dagger. "Our social standing?" he repeated, and there was a dangerous tone in his voice. "You know what I'm talking about. A company of your size can't afford scandals, and your excessive closeness with the help has been noticed." The housekeeper stopped cleaning. The blood had completely drained from her face. They were talking about her as if she wasn't there, as if she was an inconvenient object that needed to be removed. "Get out," said the businessman. But it wasn't clear who the order was directed to. The ex-wife smiled, interpreting the command as a victory. "I knew you'd see reason. I'll come back tomorrow to talk about the details of the reconciliation." But when she turned to leave, she realized that his gaze wasn't on her. It was on the housekeeper, who had dropped the mop and was walking towards the back door, her face contorted in a mixture of pain and determination. "Where are you going?" His question came out louder than he intended. She stopped at the door but didn't turn around. "To my place, sir, like I always should have stayed." The ex-wife left the mansion with a victorious smile, but the businessman didn't even notice. His eyes were fixed on the back door, through which the housekeeper had disappeared. The silence that followed was deafening, filled only by the distant sound of a door slamming shut. He found the resignation letter the next day on the kitchen table. A simple sheet of paper, with careful but unadorned handwriting, few words that carried the weight of a decision she had made during a sleepless night in the cramped bed of her boarding house. "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't be back." No elaborate explanation, no drama, just the silent dignity of someone who recognizes when she is not welcome. He crumpled the paper between his fingers and then smoothed it out again, as if he could undo what was written there. For 3 days, the mansion was in a chaotic state that perfectly reflected his internal turmoil. His son threw constant tantrums, complaining that nobody knew how to do things the right way. The new housekeeper he had hired in a hurry left everything spotless, but somehow the house seemed empty, as if it had lost its soul. On Wednesday, he couldn't take it anymore. He drove to the boarding house on the other side of town, a dilapidated building that contrasted brutally with the world of luxury in which he lived. The doorman, an elderly man with worn clothes, looked at him suspiciously when he asked for her room. "She's already moved out," he said dryly. "She left the new address with the landlady, but she's not here." The businessman felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. She had completely disappeared from his life, as if she had never existed. During the following days, he became a different person. Impatient in meetings, distracted during negotiations, losing the focus that had always been his trademark in business. It was the ex-wife who brought the news 2 weeks later, with that smile that he was learning to hate. "I heard your little maid had the baby," she said, examining her nails with false disinterest. "Premature birth. She's in the public hospital." He didn't hear the rest of what she said. He was already grabbing his car keys, his heart beating so hard that it felt like it was going to explode in his chest. The traffic had never seemed so slow, each red light an eternity of agony. The public hospital was a completely different world from the private establishments he knew. Narrow corridors, Lots of people waiting, the smell of disinfectant mixed with anxiety. He felt completely out of place there, but he didn't care. He found her in the maternity ward, pale and exhausted, but with a radiant smile on her face as she held a tiny baby in her arms. When she saw him standing in the doorway, the smile disappeared, replaced by an expression of surprise and confusion. "How did you know I was here?" she asked, her voice weak. He approached slowly, as if she were a wild animal that could run away at any moment. Can I see him?" She hesitated, but then nodded. The baby was small and fragile, with the reddish skin of premature babies, but his eyes were open and seemed to focus directly on his face. Something inside the businessman broke and reassembled at the same time. "He's beautiful," he murmured, his voice thick with an emotion he couldn't control. "The doctor said he'll be fine. He just needs to gain weight." She spoke softly, but there was a maternal pride in her voice that deeply moved him. They talked in whispers for hours, while the baby slept between them. She told him about the difficult days in the hospital, about how she had saved every penny to get a small apartment in a simple but safe neighborhood. He talked about how the mansion had become empty without her, about how his son had asked several times when she would return. "I can't go back," she said finally. "You know I can't." "Why not?" He held her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "Because I don't belong in your world. Because your ex-wife was right. Because—" She stopped, fighting back tears. "Because I don't want my son to grow up feeling inferior because of who his mother is." It was then that he did something he had never done in his life. Right there in the hospital room, in front of other patients and visitors, he knelt beside her bed and said the words he had kept in his chest for weeks. "I love you. I don't know when it happened. I don't know how. But I know I've never felt this way for anyone before. And if you leave me, I'll spend the rest of my life regretting not fighting for you." The silence that followed was tense, charged with possibilities. She looked at him as if she were seeing a ghost, as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. "You don't understand," she whispered. "People will talk. They'll say I'm a gold digger, that I took advantage of the situation. Your company could suffer. Your business. To hell with the business." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. "To hell with the people. You're the only real thing that's happened in my life in years." It was then that the door to the room opened and a man walked in with determined steps. Tall, tanned, wearing a leather jacket and arms full of tattoos. The businessman stood up instinctively, preparing for what looked like a confrontation. But when the man saw the woman in the bed with the baby, his hard face transformed completely, his eyes filled with tears, and he stopped as if he had been punched. "My girl," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "I've finally found you." The housekeeper looked at the man as if she was seeing a ghost. "Dad?" The word came out as an incredulous whisper. The businessman watched the scene without understanding as the biker approached the bed with a gentleness that completely contrasted with his intimidating appearance. "I've been looking for you for 20 years, said the man, reaching out to touch his daughter's face. "Since your mother died and you disappeared from the orphanage, I never stopped looking." The revelation hit everyone in the room like lightning. The woman he loved wasn't an orphan as he thought. She had family. She had a father who had been looking for her for 2 decades. And by the man's appearance and presence, it wasn't exactly the type of family he had imagined. The biker introduced himself as the leader of a respected group in the region, owner of several workshops and transportation companies that operated completely legally. Far from the stereotype that his appearance suggested, he had built an empire based on honest work and protection of the community. His tireless search for his daughter had become legendary among his comrades. "When your mother died in the accident, you were only 16, he explained, gently holding his grandson in his arms. "The system put you in that terrible foster home, and when I got permission to pick you up, you had run away. I spent every penny I had hiring private detectives. The revelation completely changed the power dynamic. The businessman discovered, during the conversations that followed, that several of his companies had security and transportation contracts with organizations linked to the bikers group. The man he had underestimated by appearance controlled an impressive network of legitimate and respected businesses. "You're that businessman who owns the construction company downtown," said the biker, studying him with penetrating eyes. "I've heard of you. Reputation for being tough in business, but fair with employees." The initial discomfort gave way to a tense but respectful conversation between the two men. The father made it clear that his intentions towards his daughter and grandson were serious, but also demonstrated that he was not a man to be underestimated or manipulated. In the months that followed, everyone's lives changed drastically. The housekeeper moved to a comfortable house that her father bought near his main workshop, but the businessman visited her religiously every afternoon. The relationship between them developed now under the protective but fair gaze of the biker father-in-law. The baby thrived, gaining weight and health, and the businessman was surprised at how easily he adapted to the role of a father figure. He woke up in the middle of the night to help with feedings, changed diapers with fingers that normally signed million-dollar contracts, and discovered a patience he never knew he possessed. But external pressure increased. The ex-wife had discovered about the housekeeper's family and began a silent campaign to destroy his reputation in the social circles of the elite. Venomous comments at dinners, insinuations during charity events, a venom distilled with surgical precision. "You can't be serious about getting involved with a woman from that family," she said during an unannounced visit to the mansion. "Think about what it will do to your image, to your business. Think about the future of our son." It was then that the biggest turnaround happened. The businessman's son, who had spent months watching the changes in his father, surprised everyone by confronting his mother. "Stop talking bad about her," said the boy, with a determination that resembled his father. "She's nicer to me than you ever were, and the baby is my brother, even if you don't like it." The revelation that his own son preferred the new family situation was a blow that the ex-wife didn't expect. Her strategy of using the boy as an ally had turned against her in a devastating way. The silent war culminated when the ex-wife tried to use information about the housekeeper's family to blackmail the businessman, threatening to expose dubious connections to his business partners. But the plan backfired when an investigation proved that all the activities of the bikers group were not only legal, but exemplary in terms of social responsibility. The scandal she expected to create turned against her when it was discovered that she had spread false and defamatory information. The society of which she was so proud began to see her with different eyes, questioning her integrity and motivations. During this turbulent period, the housekeeper gradually transformed. The support of her newfound family, combined with the unconditional love of the businessman, helped her develop a confidence that had been stifled by years of struggle and humiliation. She began studying at night, preparing for the college entrance exam she had always dreamed of taking. The businessman, inspired by the strength and determination of the woman he loved, made a decision that surprised everyone. He sold a significant portion of his most profitable businesses and invested the assets in a social consulting company that worked directly with underserved communities, creating job opportunities and professional development. "I never thought money could have such a clear purpose," he said, explaining the decision to his biker father-in-law. "She showed me that real wealth is not in the bank account, but in the impact you have on people's lives." The company prospered rapidly, becoming a benchmark in social responsibility. The businessman discovered that he had found not only a new purpose, but a form of business that gave him genuine satisfaction. Profits remained significant, but now carried a moral weight that filled him with pride. A year after their first meeting in the hospital, they were married in a ceremony that marked an era in the city. not for the ostentation, but for the moving simplicity and the unlikely union of two worlds that seemed incompatible. The biker family mixed harmoniously with the businessman's few true friends. The baby, now robust and healthy, slept peacefully in the arms of the stepfather who had officially adopted him. The businessman's rebellious son, transformed by the experience, helped take care of his younger brother with genuine affection, proving that even children can be touched by the transformative power of true love. During the party, the biker approached his son-in-law and offered a private toast. "You've proven that you deserve my daughter," he said, raising his glass. "Not for the wealth or position, but for having the courage to change when you found something that was worth more than everything you already possessed." Months later, when the couple's first biological child was born, the family was complete in a way that none of them had imagined possible. The mansion, once empty and cold despite all the luxury, had become a true home, filled with children's laughter and the warmth of people who genuinely loved each other. The ex-wife attempted one last legal move to gain custody of her eldest son, but the boy, now old enough to express his opinion, was adamant in his choice to remain with his father and new family. The judge, impressed with the stability and evident love in the new home, denied the request. The businessman and the former housekeeper became an example in the business community, showing that it is possible to reconcile financial success with social responsibility. Their stories spread, inspiring other entrepreneurs to rethink their priorities and the way they conducted their business. 5 years after their first meeting, they walked through the renovated mansion, watching their 3 children playing in the garden. The eldest taught the youngest to ride a bike with the patience and affection he had learned watching his parents. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that push hadn't happened," she said, leaning against his chest. "I think fate would have found another way," he replied, kissing the top of her head. "Some people are just meant to meet, no matter how many obstacles there are along the way." The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with golden tones that reflected in the pool where the children played. The mansion, once a symbol of golden solitude, had transformed into what it was always meant to be, a home built on true love, where social differences dissolved before the strength of a family united by choice and not by convenience.